Black woman denied first-class seat. Turns out she's the federal auditor on board. The cabin was quiet, that kind of expensive quiet you only find in first class. Leather seats soft like the hum of engines, so steady it felt rehearsed. And then one voice cut through it like a blade. "Ma'am, this seat isn't for passengers like you." Heads turned. Even the air changed. The woman in the pale blue suit didn't move, didn't flinch. Her posture was perfect. Her expression calm. Too calm for the way the flight attendant's finger hovered inches from her face. Row 2 amperes. Window seat. Paid in full. But none of that mattered now. Not to the woman standing above her, uniform crisp, tone sharp, trying to make her small in a space built for comfort. Behind them, a man in a gray blazer leaned forward, whispering to his seatmate. Probably printed that ticket at home. Another passenger, older, well-dressed, let out a soft scoff. The kind that says, "I knew it." The flight attendant gestured toward economy. "Let's not make a scene, all right." But a scene was already happening in silence. The woman in blue, her name not yet spoken, turned her head slowly, eyes calm but unyielding. "Is there a problem with my seat?" she asked. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried, like steel under silk. The attendant exhaled, annoyed. "You're in first class, ma'am. That seat's reserved for premium passengers." A pause. Just long enough for humiliation to breathe. Row 3 looked up. Row 1 pretended not to. Somewhere behind them, a phone camera quietly blinked red. And then the supervisor arrived. Tall, stiff, the kind of authority that thinks it never has to explain itself. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to stand," he said. The woman smiled faintly, almost sadly. "You should be careful with that request." His brow furrowed. "Excuse me." Before she could answer, a younger flight attendant stepped forward, uncertain but brave. "Sir, I scanned her ticket. It came up green." The supervisor snapped, "Stay out of this," but it was too late. The cabin had heard, and the energy shifted. The woman's calm became heavier, deliberate. She adjusted her cuffs, looked out the window at the fading light, then back up at the man. "Tell me," she said softly, "do you always speak to paying customers like suspects?" No one breathed. The older man in row 3 suddenly found the floor fascinating. The crew hesitated, one step between authority and doubt. And in that stillness, something powerful began to form. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now back to her. Because what no one on that plane realized yet was that the woman they were trying to remove wasn't just a passenger. She was the federal auditor assigned to investigate them. And this flight, it had just failed the test. 20 minutes earlier, the boarding gate had looked ordinary, just another flight to DC, passengers juggling coffee and deadlines. No one noticed the woman in the tailored pale blue suit step quietly through security. No entourage, no jewelry, just a slim leather briefcase and a badge tucked out of sight. Her name, Dr. Layla Monroe, occupation Federal Aviation Compliance Auditor. Assignment, observe discrimination patterns on domestic flights without revealing identity. She had done this before 12 times in 6 months, 12 quiet audits disguised as business trips. Every time she dressed differently. Once designer heels, once thrift store sneakers, today a neutral suit. The point wasn't to hide wealth. It was to test perception. As she walked down the jet bridge, the air changed. She saw it in glances, the brief flicker of suspicion that lives behind polite smiles. Still, she greeted the crew with grace. "Good evening." No reply. Just a nod from the senior flight attendant, the same woman who would later point a finger inches from her face. Seat 2 amperes waited by the window. Layla placed her briefcase beneath the seat, opened a small notebook, and wrote a line, her ritual before every audit. Observe. Record. Don't react until the system breaks itself. She glanced around the cabin. 2 executives whispering about stocks. A couple clinking glasses of champagne. Every face told her what they expected first class to look like. She knew she didn't fit it, not by their unspoken rules. Overhead, the captain's voice cracked through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. Flight time to Washington, D.C. is 2 hours and 40 minutes. Polite applause followed. The same empty ritual. As the crew prepared for takeoff, the senior attendant, name tag Harris, began scanning the rows. When her eyes landed on Layla, her posture stiffened. "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right cabin?" It was always that question. The same tone, soft enough to sound procedural, sharp enough to wound. Layla smiled faintly. "Yes. 2 amperes." The attendant frowned. "I'll double check." She walked away, but not far, just to the service panel, whispering into her intercom, unaware the auditor could see the reflection in the glass. Layla made another note. Observation 3, staff communication bypasses courtesy when subject doesn't fit visual profile. She remembered Atlanta 2021. A young black consultant pulled from business class midair for seat mismatch. That complaint had reached her desk. No resolution, no apology, just silence. That memory was why she was here now. Across the aisle, a young flight attendant paused near her row, hesitant. "I like your suit," she said softly. "Is that linen?" Lila looked up surprised. "It is. Thank you." The kindness lingered for only a second before the supervisor's voice called out Lang back to galley. The girl flinched and walked away. And in that moment, Lila understood exactly how this would unfold. She didn't need confrontation to confirm bias. It always found her first. So she closed her notebook, folded her hands, and waited for the world to fail its own inspection. The announcement had just ended when the first spark lit. "Ma'am, I checked again," the senior attendant said, returning with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "There's been a mix-up. This seat is reassigned." Layla looked up from her folded hands. "Reassigned by who?" The attendant hesitated. "By the system." Passengers nearby shifted slightly, pretending not to listen but leaning closer all the same. A man across the aisle whispered to his wife. "Here we go again." Layla kept her tone level. "My boarding pass was scanned, my ID verified. If there's a mix-up, it's not mine." The attendant's smile cracked. "You'll need to step aside while we resolve it." "That won't be necessary," Layla said calmly. "You can resolve it right here." For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of the engines filled the silence like static. Then the attendant pressed the call button, summoning her supervisor. From the front of the cabin, a man in his 40s appeared, tall, silver badge on his chest, expression already set in judgment. "Is there an issue, miss?" "Harris. She's occupying a premium seat with a mismatched record," Harris said quickly, her voice steady but defensive. The man's eyes flicked toward Layla, then down to her shoes, low heels, neutral tone, government standard. "Ma'am, may I see your ticket?" Layla passed it to him without hesitation. He barely looked at it before shaking his head. "This must be counterfeit. We'll handle this outside." "Outside," Layla repeated softly. "Yes, before boarding completes. We can't hold up departure." A few rows back, someone muttered, "Classic." Another voice, female, sharp. "Would they say that if she looked different?" The room rippled with uneasy whispers. The supervisor straightened, posture heavy with authority. "Ma'am, please stand." Layla didn't. She adjusted her cuff again, slow and deliberate. "Sir, if you remove me, you'll be interrupting a federal procedure." He frowned. "Excuse me, document this," she said, eyes steady. "The moment you ignored verification because of appearance," Miss Harris's face flushed. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Layla asked her, voice still soft. "Policy, or prejudice dressed as protocol," no one answered. The young attendant, the one who had admired her suit, stepped forward slightly. "Sir," she said, almost whispering, "I scanned that ticket myself. It was valid." The supervisor turned sharply. "Back to your station, Lang." "But now." Lang's lips pressed into a line. She obeyed, but her hesitation hung in the air like smoke. Lila took in the faces around her, the sideways glances, the silent verdicts already forming. She'd seen this pattern 100 times. Accusation, first facts later. From the corner of her eye, she caught a passenger lifting his phone. Recording. Good, she thought. Let witnesses see what systems hide. The supervisor exhaled. "I'm calling ground security." Layla nodded once, as if taking mental notes for an invisible report. "Perfect," she said quietly. "That'll make this audit easier." He paused. "Audit?" But she didn't answer. Not yet. The plane wasn't moving, but the story was. Every camera, every whisper, every prejudice on display, exactly what she came here to find. The cabin had gone still, that kind of fragile quiet, where everyone waits for someone else to do the right thing. The supervisor stood frozen with his radio in hand, thumb hovering over the button. Layla didn't move. She didn't have to. Her calm was the most disarming thing in the room. Security will board shortly, he said louder than necessary, as if volume could make him right. But before he could press the call, a voice broke the silence. Sir, she's telling the truth. Every head turned. It was Lang, the young flight attendant standing halfway down the aisle, eyes wide but steady. I scanned her ticket. I watched it go green. There's no mismatch. Harris, the senior attendant, stiffened. Lang, that's enough. No, it's not enough, Lang said. We keep saying policy, but it's not policy to humiliate someone. The supervisor's jaw clenched. Back to your post now. Lang shook her head. Not this time. Her defiance cracked the air like turbulence. Passengers whispered, phones tilted higher, recording openly now. Layla didn't speak. She only watched the corners of her eyes softening. She knew this moment the moment someone in the system finally saw it for what it was. From row 3, an older woman raised her voice, trembling but firm. I heard her. The young one's right. That lady didn't do anything. A man beside her muttered, You sure you want to get involved? She turned steel in her tone. Maybe someone should have a long time ago. The supervisor took a step forward, scanning the rows like a teacher losing control of a class. This is an internal matter. Everyone stay seated. But the authority in his voice no longer landed. It just fell flat like a script no one believed anymore. Lang took one more step toward Layla. She's not wrong, Lang said quietly. You're all seeing it. Harris hissed Lang, you'll lose your job. Lang swallowed hard. Maybe. But at least I'll keep my conscience. Layla finally spoke calm, even carrying enough weight to steady the room. Integrity always costs something, she said softly. But silence costs more. For a long second, no one moved. The sound of the engines became a heartbeat, constant, heavy, human. Then from the back, another voice joined in, a passenger, younger, phone in hand. This looks wrong, he said. I'm filming for her protection. The supervisor turned red. You can't record here. But it was too late. The story was already leaving the cabin through a dozen tiny screens. Layla sat still, breathing slow. Inside, her pulse was steady. She had trained for this. Her reports always relied on written evidence, timestamps, testimonies. But this time, witnesses were writing the story for her. Lang lingered near the aisle, torn between duty and decency. Ma'am, she said softly to Layla, I'm sorry for what's happening. Layla met her eyes. Don't be. Just keep standing. And for a moment, brief, electric, real, the balance of the room shifted. It wasn't authority that filled the space now. It was conscience. The supervisor's patience snapped before the cameras did. Enough, he barked, waving to Harris. Get her up. The senior attendant hesitated only a second before stepping forward, voice trembling with authority. Ma'am, I'm asking you one last time. But the line broke mid-sentence when she reached out and grabbed Lila's arm. Gasps shot through the cabin like static. Phones lifted higher. Lang froze near the galley, horror written all over her face. Layla didn't yank back. She simply looked down at the hand, gripping her sleeve, immaculate nails, trembling knuckles, the visible shape of someone certain they were right. Take your hand off me, she said quietly. The words weren't loud, but they hit like impact. Harris released her as if burned. You're being non-compliant. No, Layla replied. You're being recorded. A collective breath rippled through the rows. The supervisor turned toward the intercom. Captain, request immediate ground assistance, but his radio cut with feedback muffled by the chorus of voices rising from the passengers. She didn't do anything. Stop touching her. This is harassment. The cabin no longer belonged to the crew. It belonged to the witnesses. Layla stayed seated, hands folded neatly on her lap, gaze fixed forward. Her stillness was defiance, the kind that doesn't need volume to feel dangerous. And in that frozen moment, a memory returned, like turbulence in her chest. Atlanta 3 years earlier. She was off duty boarding a commuter flight home, wore jeans and a sweatshirt. The gate agent stopped her with a smile that wasn't a smile. Ma'am, first class is full. She had shown her ticket. He'd laughed. You people always think there's been a mistake. She'd said nothing then, just turned away. But that humiliation had followed her home, sat beside her on the couch that night, whispering, do something. That's when she joined the audit division. To turn her silence into evidence. The present snapped back as the supervisor raised his hand toward her briefcase. Security will search your belongings. You'll do no such thing, she said, voice even deadly calm. He scoffed. Who do you think you are? Layla met his eyes, not angry, just unyielding. Someone who measures exactly this moment. Lang stepped forward again, shaking. Sir, please don't touch her things. Step back, he ordered. She didn't. Passengers were standing now, phones angled from every row. The hum of engines mixed with the relentless click of recordings. Layla leaned slightly forward, her tone like glass sliding across marble. Mister, what's your name? Supervisor Daniels. Good. I'll need that for the report. What report? He snapped. She reached into her pocket slowly, carefully, every eye on her hand. When she withdrew it, it wasn't a weapon. It was a slim black phone, stamped with a federal seal. I think she said, tapping the screen, once you just failed an active compliance audit. The words hung in the air heavier than gravity. Lang covered her mouth. Harris stumbled a step back. The passengers went silent, not out of fear but realization. Layla sat back in her seat, composed as ever. Now she said, shall we proceed by procedure? And for the first time, the people who'd been in control looked like the ones waiting for permission to breathe. The supervisor's mouth moved, but no words came out. He looked at the phone in her hand, the federal seal glinting under cabin light, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he took a step back. Layla didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The silence around her did the work. Miss Monroe, she said clearly, activating the phone's speaker. Audit Protocol Delta, 4 Flight Number 1089. Commencing live record. A synthesized voice answered from the device, calm, genderless official. Verification confirmed. Compliance team on standby. Continue documentation. The reaction was instant. Lang gasped softly. Harris froze mid-breath. Daniels, the supervisor, tried to recover, but his confidence had already left the cabin. What is this? He stammered. This, Layla replied, is oversight. Her thumb slid across the screen, revealing a live feed timestamp flight number coordinates. Every word spoken within 15 feet was now archived in a federal server. Harris's jaw clenched. You can't just, I can, Layla interrupted gently, and you agreed to it when you accepted employment under FAA jurisdiction. Daniels tried again. You blindsided us. You could have said something before boarding. I did, she said. I said good evening. You didn't answer. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Someone near row 3 whispered, oh my God, she's real. Another voice answered. That's why she never shouted. Layla adjusted her cuff posture straight as marble. Continue your duties, she said to the crew. This flight will depart as planned under observation. Harris blinked. Observation? Yes. That means every minute until landing is recorded, every instruction, every tone, every delay. Her eyes moved between them. So choose your words carefully. Lang looked down, tears threatening, part relief, part fear. Lila softened. You did the right thing, she said quietly. Keep doing it. The younger woman nodded, gripping the beverage cart like it might steady her life. Daniels finally found a whisper of authority. You can't override Captain Command. He'll want confirmation. He'll have it, Layla said, tapping the phone again. Control patch communication to cockpit. A beat later, a metallic voice came through the intercom. Flight 1089 cockpit connected. This is Federal Auditor Monroe, she said. Confirming active compliance audit. No cause for panic, continue standard procedure. The captain's reply was slow, careful. Understood, ma'am. Every passenger stared at her now, not as a stranger, but as a revelation. Harris looked like she wanted to disappear. Layla set the phone gently on her tray table, the federal crest glowing faintly. Mr. Daniels, she said, you may proceed with takeoff once the crew review their tone and language. That's not a request, it's policy. He swallowed. Yes, ma'am. And just like that, the hierarchy inverted. The people who tried to expel her now stood waiting for instruction. The woman they dismissed as a mistake was quietly rewriting the rules mid-flight. From somewhere in the back, a passenger whispered, that's justice at 30000 feet. Layla exhaled slowly, gazed steady on the horizon outside her window, dawn light catching the wing. Let's see, she murmured almost to herself, how high accountability can fly. 10 minutes later, the cabin had changed temperature. It wasn't warmer or colder, just heavier, dense with realization. The same passengers who had looked through her now couldn't stop watching her. Lang returned from the galley, voice low. Control just pinged the crew manifest. They confirmed it. Harris didn't respond. Her hands were clasped, tight knuckles white. At the front, Daniel spoke into his radio tone shaky. Captain Federal Clearance verified. Passenger Monroe is, the line crackled. Then came the captain's voice, crisp but trembling, acknowledged. Full compliance required. She outranks flight command for audit duration. Every word landed like a gavel. Daniels turned back toward her, his practiced confidence collapsing into apology. Ma'am, we had no idea. Layla tilted her head. You didn't need to know who I was. You only needed to treat me like who I am, a passenger. The sentence hung there, soft but sharp enough to draw blood. Row 3 whispered again. She's the auditor. The one from those cases online. Oh my God, she's real. Lang's eyes shimmered. Harris just stared at the floor, lips trembling. Layla didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply looked around the cabin, the same faces that had doubted her minutes ago, and began to speak as if giving testimony under oath. This wasn't about a seat, she said, voice calm, steady, broadcast through the cabin speakers. It was about how quickly assumption replaces respect. Her words filled the silence, the way light fills a dark room. She turned slightly toward Harris. You said this seat isn't for passengers like you. Do you remember? Harris nodded, tears threatening. Tell me, Layla continued, what kind of passengers did you mean? No answer, just the rhythmic pulse of engines. I'll tell you what I heard, Layla said softly. You meant quiet ones used to being doubted. She looked toward the passengers. You see, discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles while asking for your boarding pass twice. Lang blinked back tears. A woman in row 1 lowered her phone, whispering, She's not angry. She's right. Daniels took a step closer, voice small. What happens now? Layla leaned back in her seat. Now protocol continues. I'll file a live report to the FAA when we land. Every recording, every transmission archived. Then she paused. But I'm giving you a chance to make a statement before that. Transparency works both ways. Harris inhaled sharply, searching for words. I didn't mean to offend you. You didn't offend me, Layla replied. You exposed yourself. There's a difference. A murmur rolled through the cabin, not outrage this time, but awakening. Lang whispered, thank you for saying it out loud. Layla's eyes softened. Someone has to. Outside the window, clouds folded like white sheets below them. Inside, the hierarchy of the sky had been rewritten. She picked up her phone again, her reflection framed by the glowing seal on its back. This is Monroe, she said into the mic. Audit escalation confirmed. Crew identified, behavior log, passenger testimony secured. The AI voice responded, confirmed. Compliance breach documented. And in that sterile official acknowledgement, the weight of justice finally touched the air. Layla set the phone down and closed her eyes for a moment. Her calm returned, not silence, but power refined into stillness. When she opened them again, no one dared to look away. The chime above the cabin door sounded once a short tone, mechanical, decisive. Attention, crew, came the captain's voice, slow and deliberate. All communications are now monitored under federal audit protocol. Await further instruction. And just like that, command slipped out of Daniels' hands. He stood there, rigid, pale, clutching his useless radio like a relic from a different world. Across from him, Harris looked smaller than she ever had, shoulders, curved mascara streaking down her cheek. Lila didn't gloat. She only said, this is what accountability feels like. It's quiet until it isn't. Her phone buzzed once. The AI voice came through. Live compliance system initiated. Crew access temporarily suspended. Lang's terminal blinked red. Harris's keycard light flashed twice, then died. Daniels looked at his wrist tablet. It read, access revoked. The system didn't ask for permission, it executed judgment. Passengers began whispering. What's happening? Is she firing them? She's not saying a word. And that was the point. Layla didn't have to. The silence was eloquent enough. She turned to Daniels. You said earlier that this seat wasn't mine, that I was holding up real passengers. Now look around. He did slowly. Every real passenger was staring back at him, phones in hand, eyes lit with the recognition of what they'd witnessed. From the first row, a woman said aloud, you treated her like she didn't belong. You should be the one to leave. Her voice sparked a ripple of agreement. Daniel swallowed. Please, ma'am, let's not make this worse. Lila met his gaze. Worse for who? The cabin door opened slightly. A ground officer stepped in confusion on his face. Federal inspection in progress, Layla said before he could speak. Stand by. The officer froze, nodded, and backed out. She lifted her phone again. Control confirm staff lockdown for Flight 1089. Confirm, the voice replied. Ground supervisors alerted. Records archived. Lang's eyes darted between the others. Ma'am, what happens now? Layla looked at her with quiet empathy. You stay calm. Tell the truth. The rest will sort itself. Harris sank into the jump seat, whispering. I didn't mean. Layla turned to her. Meaning doesn't erase impact. Then softer. But you'll have a chance to learn. That's more than most get. Daniels dropped his radio voice, trembling. You're ending our careers. No, Layla replied. You ended your own the moment you mistook bias for procedure. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. From behind, a passenger began clapping once, then twice, slow, deliberate echoing through the pressurized air. Another joined, then another. It wasn't loud. It was heavy, a sound made of respect and reckoning. Lang stood upright, tears now visible but steady. Thank you, she said quietly to Layla. Layla nodded once. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for speaking. She tapped her phone one last time. Audit documentation complete. Termination protocols. Pending legal review. The light on Harris's panel went dark. Daniel sat down, finally silent. Justice didn't roar. It descended. Outside, the clouds parted, revealing strips of sunlight breaking through the gray. Inside, an order long overdue had been restored, not by anger but by truth. For the first time in nearly an hour, the plane was still. Engines humming, passengers silent. The chaos had burned itself into clarity. Layla sat with her hands folded, the faint glow of the federal seal fading on her phone screen. The storm was over, not because anyone surrendered, but because truth had settled in every corner of the cabin. Lang remained near her, rose shoulders, straight chin trembling with relief. You could have yelled, she whispered. You could have shouted them down. Layla turned toward her, voice low. Yelling never changes systems. It only wakes them up. Change comes from what happens after they open their eyes. Lang blinked as if memorizing the sentence. Harris stared down at her idle badge. I don't deserve to wear this anymore. You do, Layla said gently. You just need to wear it differently next time. She rose slowly, smoothing her jacket, every movement deliberate. Passengers watched not as spectators anymore, but as witnesses, part of something bigger than the flight they had boarded. Lila spoke without the microphone, but the room carried her voice. I came here to measure compliance, she said. But what I found wasn't policy failure, it was empathy failure. We built systems to keep people safe, and somewhere along the way, we stopped protecting their dignity. A murmur moved through the cabin. Someone sniffled. Another nodded quietly. She turned toward the crew, not with anger, but with authority born from calm. This wasn't about punishment. It was about proof. Proof that respect can't depend on appearance or tone or comfort. It has to live in policy or it dies in practice. Her gaze swept across the rows, pausing at the cameras still recording. If you post this, she said, don't post it for outrage. Post it so the next person like me doesn't have to explain why they belong. For a long moment, no one moved. The hum of the engines became the only sound, low and steady, like the pulse of something reborn. Then from row one, a woman spoke softly. You didn't just audit them, you changed them. Layla smiled faintly. Maybe, but real change starts when I leave this plane, when they remember how this felt. She picked up her phone again. Control, she said. Audit 1089 complete. Document, full crew termination review, and passenger testimony archive. Initiate closure file, Monroe. Confirm, the voice replied. Report logged. Layla powered down the device, set it in her bag, and turned toward the window. The clouds outside had broken completely now, sunlight pouring through, soft and unfiltered. She looked back once more at the cabin, at faces now softened, humbled, awake. Her final words were almost a whisper, but they carried like a vow. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the standard. The applause this time wasn't for spectacle. It was for recognition that justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it walks down the aisle in silence and leaves the world a little quieter, a little better. And as Flight 1089 climbed toward the light, every witness aboard understood what dignity looked like when it finally took flight. The plane touched down under a washed-out morning sky. No applause this time, just a hush that felt almost sacred. When the landing gear locked and the seatbelt sign chimed, no one moved. Every passenger waited for Layla. She stood slowly adjusting her jacket, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Lang stepped forward, eyes red but bright. "Ma'am," she whispered, "will we lose everything?" Layla's answer was measured. "You'll lose what you can't defend, but you'll keep what you've learned." Lang nodded, understanding more than she could say. Harris sat stiff in her jump seat, staring at her own reflection in the metal panel across the aisle. "I never thought I'd be the one in the report," she murmured. Layla looked at her gently. "No one ever does. That's why reports exist." As passengers began to rise, an older man near the exit turned to Layla. "Miss Monroe," he said, voice rough with age, "I've flown for 40 years. I've seen how they look at people like you, like us. I didn't speak up. I'm sorry." Layla nodded once. "Then start speaking now." He smiled faintly, eyes wet. "Yes, ma'am." The door opened. A gust of light flooded the cabin, sharp, clean, forgiving. Federal agents in plain suits waited at the gate, clipboards ready. They didn't salute, just acknowledged her with quiet respect. One of them approached. "Audit received in real time. Media already tracking it." "I expected that," Layla said. "Let them. It's not a scandal. It's evidence." She walked down the jet bridge, briefcase in hand, each step echoing like punctuation. Behind her, murmurs filled the cabin, not gossip, but awakening. Lang stood near the cockpit, watching her go. Harris reached out and touched her arm. "Maybe she saved more than just her seat," Harris whispered. Lang nodded. "She saved our chance to be better." Outside, the terminal lights glowed pale gold against the morning fog. Reporters were already gathering near the window, flashes popping like tiny lightning bolts. Layla didn't stop for them. She never did. Instead, she paused at a quiet corner of the gate, pulled out her phone, and opened the audit file. One tap, submit report. The screen blinked once. Filed 0642 amperes. M. Washington, D.C. A single line of text appeared beneath it, bias at altitude resolved through intervention and evidence. She closed the device and exhaled, watching planes drift across the horizon. For a fleeting moment, she saw her younger self, the woman who once stayed silent after being turned away. That version of her was gone, now replaced by someone who had made silence her weapon and truth her language. Her phone buzzed again, a message from the director, "Audit complete. Impact recorded nationwide. Prepare for Senate briefing." She smiled, not for pride but relief. As she walked toward the glass doors leading out of the terminal, her reflection passed across a poster promoting the airline's slogan, "Where comfort takes flight." She stopped just long enough to whisper, "Maybe now so will justice." And with that, Layla Monroe disappeared into the sunrise, not as a passenger, not even as an auditor, but as proof that calm power can still move mountains one flight at a time. 5 years later, the memory of Flight 1089 had settled into the world like a landmark no one could erase. The footage still lived online, tucked between documentaries and training manuals. New recruits in every major airline now watched it on their first day, not as punishment, but as a compass. In classrooms and conferences, they called it the Monroe Standard. It wasn't law, it was culture. A reminder whispered before takeoff. Every seat has a story. Treat it like it's being recorded. Dr. Layla Monroe no longer worked for the FAA. She had resigned quietly after her final audit, choosing something slower, smaller, more human. A foundation now bore her name, the Monroe Initiative for Equity in Motion, providing scholarships for young women of color pursuing aviation law. Every spring, she still received thousands of letters. Some came from flight attendants who'd once feared her inspections, now thanking her for changing how they saw passengers. Others came from travelers, people who wrote, "I was in seat 2 amperes once. Thank you for giving us language for what we felt." Layla never answered all of them. She read in silence, tea cooling beside her desk, the world finally moving at a gentler pace. One afternoon, a visitor arrived, Lang, older now, uniform, crisp name tag, reading Chief Training Officer. She smiled as she entered. "I thought you'd retired somewhere with no airplanes." Lila laughed softly. "And miss all the turbulence." They sat by the window watching planes ascend and vanish into the clouds. Lang said, "We teach your story now. First day of training. There's a moment in the video when you don't move even when she touches you. They always ask why you didn't fight back." Layla's gaze stayed on the sky. "Because stillness is sometimes the loudest truth." Lang nodded quiet for a long time. Before leaving, she placed a small enamel pin on the table, a winged emblem engraved with two simple words, "Seat 2 amperes." Layla turned it over in her hand, the metal warm from Lang's palm. "Keep one thing in mind," she said. "Justice isn't an event. It's maintenance." That evening, as the sun slid behind the horizon, she walked through the memorial gallery inside the foundation's lobby. On the far wall hung a single photograph, a blurred still from the viral clip, her in that pale blue suit, calm amid chaos. Beneath it, a plaque read, "She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard." Visitors paused there often not for spectacle but for reflection. Pilots, students, strangers carrying their own quiet stories. And sometimes when Layla passed by unseen, she would catch the hush that followed the kind born, not of fear, but of respect. Outside, another jet roared, skyward engines slicing through gold light. She watched it rise until it disappeared and whispered, almost smiling, "Let it keep flying." Because some legacies don't live in monuments, they live in motion. And somewhere above the clouds between policy and humanity, seat 2 amperes was still reserved for dignity.